After my divorce, my ex-husband took full custody of our son. But he didn't know the lawyer I hired was his illegitimate daughter, and that revenge runs in the blood. My name is Sophia, I'm 35 years old, and let me tell you what really happened. I was stirring honey into my morning coffee when the text came through. Just 3 words that made my hands shake so badly, I nearly dropped my phone. We won everything. The steam from my mug fogged up my reading glasses as I read it again. And again. Rachel had done it. My lawyer, brilliant, ruthless Rachel, had somehow convinced the judge to overturn David's custody ruling. After 18 months of seeing my son Oliver only on supervised weekends, I was getting him back. I should have been ecstatic. Instead, I felt this strange, hollow sensation in my chest, like something was missing from the victory. Mom, you okay? Oliver's voice drifted from the living room where he was building something elaborate with his Legos. He'd been staying with me for the past week while David was out of town on business, one of those rare moments when the custody schedule worked in my favor. I'm perfect, sweetheart, I called back, but my voice caught on the words. The thing about getting everything you fought for is that sometimes you realize the fight changed you in ways you didn't expect. When David first filed for divorce and demanded full custody, claiming I was unstable and unfit, I'd been naive enough to think the truth would be enough. That love would be enough. But David had money. Old money. The kind that buys the best lawyers and favorable outcomes. So I'd had to get creative. Rachel Martinez had come highly recommended through a friend of a friend. Mid-30s, sharp as a blade, with an eerily intense focus whenever David's name came up in conversation. She'd taken my case when 3 other lawyers had politely declined, saying it would be challenging given David's resources and connections. What they didn't know, what David certainly didn't know, was that Rachel had her own reasons for wanting to destroy him. The first hint came during our initial consultation 6 months ago. I'd been sitting in her pristine downtown office, trying not to cry as I explained how David had systematically isolated me from our son. "Tell me about your ex-husband's family," Rachel had said, her pen poised over a legal pad. "There's not much to tell. His parents died when he was young. He was raised by his grandmother. No siblings that I know of." Rachel's pen had paused mid-stroke. "No siblings at all?" Well, I'd hesitated, remembering something David had mentioned once during a particularly heated argument. He said something once about his father having an affair. Years before we met. But he never talked about it. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Rachel's dark eyes had gone very still, very focused. Did he ever mention a name? The woman his father was involved with. I'd shaken my head, but something in Rachel's expression made my skin prickle with unease. Now, sitting in my kitchen with Oliver's laughter echoing from the next room, I finally understood why Rachel had never sent me a bill. Why she'd worked nights and weekends on my case with the dedication of someone fighting a personal war. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Rachel. "Meet me at Giovanni's tonight. 8 p.m. We need to talk." The way she phrased it sent a chill down my spine. Not celebrate or discuss next steps. We need to talk. Like there was something she'd been waiting to tell me. I spent the rest of the day trying to act normal for Oliver's sake, but my mind kept circling back to those strange moments during the custody battle. The way Rachel's jaw would tighten whenever she spoke David's name. How she seemed to know exactly which buttons to push, which witnesses to call, which family secrets to excavate. By evening, Oliver was settled in front of a movie with a bowl of popcorn, and I was driving through downtown Atlanta's evening traffic toward Giovanni's. The Italian restaurant was tucked into a quiet corner of Virginia Highland, the kind of place where serious conversations happened over dim lighting and good wine. Rachel was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her back to the wall. Even in victory, she looked tense, her fingers drumming against the stem of her wine glass. "Congratulations," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "I still can't believe we actually won." "We didn't just win, Sophia. We annihilated him." Rachel's voice was steady, but there was something dark flickering in her eyes. "David's going to lose more than custody. By the time I'm finished, he'll lose his business, his reputation, his precious family legacy." The venom in her voice made me pause. Rachel, what's going on? You're scaring me a little. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. You hired me to get your son back. Mission accomplished. But you never asked why I took your case for free. My stomach twisted. I figured you were doing pro bono work or... I don't do pro bono, Sophia. I do revenge. The waiter appeared, and Rachel ordered another bottle of wine without consulting me. When he left, she leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. 28 years ago, David's father had an affair with my mother. She was 19, working as a secretary at his law firm. When she got pregnant, he paid for an apartment across town and promised to leave his wife. My mouth went dry. Rachel. He never left his wife. When I was born, he set up a trust fund and told my mother to never contact him again. She named me Martinez after her maiden name, but I know who my real father was. William Camden Stone III. David's father. The man whose portrait hung in David's study, whose law firm David had inherited, whose legacy David worshipped. David is your half-brother, I whispered. David is the golden child who got everything that should have been mine. The name, the inheritance, the respect. While my mother worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, he was getting the best education money could buy. I felt like I was falling down a rabbit hole. How long have you known? About David, I mean. Since I was 12, and my mother finally told me the truth. I've been watching him from a distance ever since, waiting for the right moment. The wine arrived, and Rachel poured herself a generous glass. Her hands were steady, but I could see the years of suppressed rage simmering just beneath the surface. You used me, I said, the realization hitting me like ice water. My custody case was just, what? A weapon. I got your son back. That's what you wanted. But you had your own agenda the whole time. Rachel met my eyes without flinching. David destroyed my mother's life. She died believing she was worthless, that she'd been nothing more than a shameful secret. He doesn't even know I exist, but he's about to. I thought about Oliver, safely home watching movies, blissfully unaware that his world was built on lies and half-truths. What happens now? Now David learns he has a sister, and that sister has been dismantling his life piece by piece. The custody case was just the beginning? Rachel smiled, and for the first time, it looked genuinely predatory. I have evidence of David's creative accounting practices at the firm. Financial documents that show he's been skimming money from client accounts to fund his lifestyle. Bank records that prove he's been hiding assets offshore to avoid paying alimony and child support. My heart started racing. How did you get all of that? You'd be amazed what people will tell you when they think you're on their side. David's been very trusting with his new lawyer friends lately. I felt sick. You've been setting him up this entire time. Justice isn't always clean, Sophia. Sometimes it requires getting your hands dirty. The restaurant buzzed with quiet conversation around us, normal people having normal dinners, while I sat there realizing I'd been a pawn in a decades-long revenge plot. What about Oliver? What happens to him when David's world comes crashing down? For the first time, Rachel's confidence wavered slightly. Oliver will be fine. He'll be with you. But his father will be destroyed. Do you know what that's going to do to a 9-year-old boy? David should have thought about that before he tried to steal your son. I stared at her, seeing clearly for the first time. Rachel wasn't just seeking justice. She was seeking complete annihilation. And she'd used my love for my son as the perfect cover. I need to think about this, I said, standing up from the table. Sophia, wait. But I was already walking away, my mind reeling with the implications of what I'd learned. Outside, the evening air felt sharp against my skin. I fumbled for my car keys, trying to process everything. David was a bastard. He'd manipulated the system to try to take my son away, and he deserved consequences. But did he deserve to have his entire life destroyed by a sister he didn't even know existed? And what did it say about me that I'd been so desperate to win that I'd never questioned why Rachel was helping me? My phone buzzed. A text from David. Need to talk. Coming over in an hour. My blood froze. David never came to my house anymore. Our interactions were strictly limited to neutral drop-off locations and terse text messages. If he was coming here, something was very wrong. I drove home faster than I should have, my mind spinning with possibilities. Had he somehow found out about Rachel? About tonight's meeting? When I pulled into my driveway, David's black BMW was already there. He was sitting on my front porch steps, still in his expensive suit but looking more disheveled than I'd seen him in years. "David, what are you doing here?" He looked up when I approached, and I was shocked to see genuine fear in his eyes. "We need to talk, Sophia, about your lawyer." My stomach dropped. What about her? Her name isn't really Rachel Martinez, is it? I felt the world tilt sideways. "I don't know what you mean." David stood up, running his hands through his hair. "I had my investigator run a background check on her after the custody ruling. Standard procedure when you lose a case that badly. You want to know what he found?" I didn't answer, but he continued anyway. "Rachel Martinez didn't exist before 15 years ago. Before that, she was Rachel Stone. And before that..." His voice broke slightly. "Before that, she was Rachel Elena Stone, daughter of William Stone and Maria Martinez." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "She's my sister, isn't she?" David's voice was barely a whisper. I wanted to lie, to protect whatever fragile piece we might have left. But the truth was written all over my face. "Jesus Christ, Sophia. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I didn't know," I said quickly. "Not until tonight." "She never told me." "She's been planning this for years. Maybe decades." David was pacing now, his composure completely shattered. "The custody case, the financial investigations, all of it. She's trying to destroy everything my father built." "Maybe your father deserved it," I said, surprised by the anger in my own voice. "Maybe you deserve it too." David stopped pacing and stared at me. "You really hate me that much?" The question caught me off guard. Did I hate him? I'd been so consumed with fighting him, with winning, that I'd stopped thinking about what I actually felt. "I hate what you did to us," I said finally. "I hate that you tried to take Oliver away from me. I hate that you made me feel like I wasn't good enough to be his mother. I was trying to protect him. From what? From me loving him too much." David's shoulders sagged. "From me, Sophia. I was trying to protect him from becoming like me." The admission hung in the air between us. For just a moment, I saw past the expensive suit and the polished facade to the man I'd once loved. The man who carried his father's sins like stones in his pockets. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "About Rachel? I don't know. Part of me thinks I should just let her have her revenge. God knows my family has it coming. And the other part?" David looked toward my house, where warm light spilled from the windows. "The other part remembers that I have a son who doesn't deserve to watch his world explode because of mistakes his grandfather made before he was born." We stood there in the gathering darkness, two broken people trying to figure out how to protect the child we'd both failed in different ways. "David," I said slowly, "what if there was another way?" "What do you mean?" An idea was forming, dangerous and probably stupid, but maybe our only chance. What if you talked to her? What if you acknowledged what your father did and tried to make it right? You think she'd listen? I think she spent her whole life feeling invisible. Maybe all she really wants is recognition. David was quiet for a long moment. "And if she doesn't? If she wants to watch me burn? Then we figure out how to protect Oliver from the fallout." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was something. A small thread of hope in an impossible situation. "There's something else," David said, his voice barely audible. "Rachel's not the only secret in my father's past." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" The investigator found records of another payment. Another trust fund, set up around the same time, for a woman named Catherine Webb. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Another affair? Another child. A daughter named Jessica. She'd be about Rachel's age. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. How many secrets did your father have? I don't know. And that's what terrifies me. The front door opened, and Oliver's voice drifted out. "Mom? Is that Dad?" David and I looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. How do you explain to a 9-year-old that his family tree is full of lies and half-siblings and decades-old revenge plots? Coming, sweetheart, I called back, then turned to David. We need to talk to Rachel together. Tomorrow. She'll never agree to meet with me. She will if I ask her to. David nodded reluctantly. And if this blows up in our faces, then we deal with it together. For Oliver's sake. It felt strange, making plans with the man who'd tried to take my son away. But Rachel was right about one thing. Family was complicated. And sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the only ones who can help you heal. The next morning, I called Rachel and asked her to meet me at Piedmont Park. Neutral ground, public space, somewhere Oliver could play on the playground while we talked. She arrived looking like she hadn't slept, her usually perfect appearance slightly rumpled. You told him, she said without preamble. He already knew. His investigator figured it out. Rachel's face went pale. What did he say? He wants to talk to you. Absolutely not. Rachel, he knows about the other trust fund too. About Catherine Webb. That stopped her cold. What? Your father had at least 2 affairs that we know of. You might have another sister out there. Rachel sank onto the park bench beside me, looking suddenly fragile. I don't understand. Neither do I. But David wants to find out the truth. About all of it. Why would he want that? I watched Oliver climb the monkey bars, his laughter carrying on the morning breeze. Because he has a son who deserves to know his real family. All of it. Including me? Especially you. Rachel was quiet for a long time, watching Oliver play. What if I can't forgive him? What if seeing him just makes me angrier? Then you'll be angry. But at least you'll be angry honestly, not from the shadows. He could try to have me disbarred for what I've done. He could. But I don't think he will. Why not? I thought about David's face last night, the way his composure had cracked when he talked about protecting Oliver from becoming like him. Because I think he's tired of carrying his father's sins. And maybe he's hoping you are too. An hour later, David arrived at the park looking nervous and overdressed in his business suit. Oliver ran to him immediately, and I watched David's face soften as he hugged our son. Whatever else had gone wrong between us, David loved Oliver fiercely. Rachel stood up slowly as David approached, and I found myself holding my breath. They stood there for a moment, 2 people who shared DNA, but nothing else, studying each other like exotic animals in a zoo. You look like him, David said finally. Our father. I wouldn't know, Rachel replied, her voice carefully neutral. I have pictures. If you want to see them. The offer seemed to catch Rachel off guard. You'd show me pictures? I'd show you everything. The house where he grew up, his journals, his law school records. I've been carrying around all this history that belongs to you too. I saw something shift in Rachel's expression, a crack in the armor she'd built around herself. Why? She asked. Why would you want to share any of that with me? David looked over at Oliver, who was now building elaborate sand castles with the focused intensity only children could muster. Because I spent my whole life trying to live up to a man who was fundamentally flawed. And maybe it's time both of us learned who he really was, instead of who we thought he was. I know who he was. He was a coward who abandoned my mother. He was that. But he was also other things. Good things and terrible things and complicated things. David sat down on the bench, suddenly looking exhausted. I've spent years trying to be him, and Sophia's spent years trying to forgive me for it. Rachel looked at me sharply. Is that true? I thought about all the nights I'd lain awake wondering how the man I'd married had become someone I didn't recognize. Your father's shadow was always in our marriage. David never talked about him, but he was always there. I used to imagine what it would be like to meet him, Rachel said quietly. When I was little, I thought maybe he'd come looking for me someday. Realize he'd made a mistake. He never looked for any of us, David said. Even me. He just expected me to follow in his footsteps without question. Did you? Follow in his footsteps. David's laugh was bitter. In all the worst ways. The 3 of us sat in silence for a while, watching Oliver play. Finally, Rachel spoke again. I could destroy you, you know. I have enough evidence to send you to prison. I know. So, why are you sitting here instead of running? David looked directly at her for the first time. Because you're my sister. And because my son deserves better than a family built on lies and secrets. Half-sister. Rachel corrected automatically. Sister. David repeated firmly. I saw Rachel's composure crack slightly, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. I don't know how to not hate you. Then hate me. But maybe we can figure out how to be a family anyway. A family? Rachel's voice was incredulous. Oliver's family. Broken and complicated and probably dysfunctional, but family. Rachel looked over at Oliver, who had noticed the serious adult conversation and was making his way back toward us with sandy hands and grass stains on his knees. Aunt Rachel. Oliver said, trying out the word. Mom said your dad's sister. Rachel's breath caught. That's right.
Cool.
I always wanted an aunt. Oliver's acceptance was so simple, so uncomplicated, that it made the rest of us look ridiculous. What happens now? I asked, voicing the question we were all thinking. Now we figure out how to be honest with each other, David said. Starting with finding Catherine Webb and any other siblings our father left behind. And the evidence I have against you? Rachel asked. We deal with it. Together. Maybe I can make restitution without destroying everything. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was something. A tentative first step toward something that might eventually look like a family. 3 months later, we found Catherine Webb living in Savannah, working as a marine biologist and completely unaware that she had 2 half-siblings in Atlanta. She had her father's eyes and her mother's quiet strength, and when we explained who we were, she listened with the patience of someone accustomed to studying complex ecosystems. So we're all products of our father's poor impulse control, was her first response, which made Rachel laugh for the first time since I'd known her. Catherine, Kate, she insisted, had grown up knowing about the trust fund but never particularly curious about its source. Her mother had told her the truth when she turned 18, but Kate had been more interested in marine conservation than family drama. I always figured if he wanted to know me, he'd have made an effort, she said over dinner at my house. Oliver was fascinated by his newest aunt, especially when she told him about the sea turtles she studied. Weren't you angry? Rachel asked. About being kept secret? Kate shrugged. I had a good mother and a good life. Some questions aren't worth the emotional energy to pursue. It was a perspective none of the rest of us had considered. David had been working with his accountant and a federal attorney to unravel the financial irregularities Rachel had uncovered. Turns out, most of the evidence she'd found pointed to sloppy bookkeeping rather than intentional fraud, but David used the opportunity to restructure his practice with more transparency. Rachel had withdrawn her more aggressive legal filings, though she'd kept her law license to practice in Georgia and was considering opening her own firm. She'd also started seeing a therapist to work through 35 years of suppressed rage. Revenge is exhausting, she'd told me last week. I think I'd rather try happiness for a while. Oliver was thriving with the expanded custody arrangement David and I had worked out. He spent equal time with both of us, plus regular dinners with his aunts. It was chaotic and unconventional, but it worked, for the most part. The knock on my door came on a Tuesday evening while Oliver was doing homework at the kitchen table. I opened it to find a woman about my age with sharp features and expensive clothes. Are you Sophia? She asked. Yes. I'm Jessica Stone. I believe you know my half-siblings. My blood turned to ice. I'm sorry, what? Jessica smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. David, Rachel, and Catherine. My father's other children. I've been watching your little family reunion with great interest. Oliver looked up from his math worksheet.
Mom?
Who is it? Go finish your homework in your room, sweetheart, I said, not taking my eyes off Jessica. When Oliver was safely upstairs, I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. What do you want? Justice, Jessica said simply. Real justice. Not the half measures my siblings seem satisfied with. I don't understand. Jessica's smile turned predatory. My mother didn't just get a trust fund, Sophia. She got something else. Something my dear half-siblings don't know about. What? A recording. My father confessing to more than just affairs. Much more. The world tilted sideways. What kind of recording? The kind that could destroy the entire Stone family legacy. The kind that could send David to prison for crimes he didn't commit but inherited nonetheless. What do you want from me? Nothing, actually. I just wanted you to know that this story isn't over. Not by a long shot. Jessica turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Sophia? You might want to ask Rachel where she really got all that evidence against David. Because I don't think she found it on her own. With that, she walked away, leaving me standing on my porch with the terrible realization that we'd all been playing a game where we didn't know the rules. And Jessica Stone had been 3 moves ahead the entire time. I went back inside on shaking legs, my mind racing. Upstairs, I could hear Oliver talking to someone on his tablet, probably his friend Marcus from school. Normal 9-year-old concerns about homework and video games. I pulled out my phone and called Rachel. We have a problem, I said when she answered. What kind of problem? The kind that has a name. Jessica Stone. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Rachel? Are you there? She found you. Rachel's voice was barely a whisper. You knew about her? I've known about her for years. I've been hoping she'd stay away. Why would she stay away? Another long pause. Because Jessica doesn't want justice, Sophia. She wants to watch the world burn. And she's very, very good at it. The line went dead, leaving me alone with the growing certainty that everything we'd fought for, everything we'd built, was about to come crashing down. And somewhere in the darkness outside my house, I had the unsettling feeling that Jessica Stone was still out there. Watching. Waiting. Planning her next move in a game I was only just beginning to understand. Oliver's voice drifted down from upstairs, innocent and happy, completely unaware that his world was about to change again. The only question now was whether any of us would survive what came next.